Hello everyone, welcome back to Savvy Looks, where I like to take outdated or damaged secondhand furniture and give it a whole new life. This week I'm working on a dresser that I actually finished about a year ago. I just never sold it. So this video is a bit delayed, but I finally restaged it and now I'm ready to show you. I bought this dresser for just $10 and my goal was to replicate an Anthropology dresser called the Enchanted Dresser. It's about $1,600, but I knew I could replicate a similar look for a lot less using a vintage piece of furniture. I wanted to do this project since I first started flipping furniture. So it took me about 2 years of looking to find a dresser for a good price that I thought could work for this vision. I took inspiration from Salvaged by Kay Scott, who made this beautiful dresser, and Pretty Distressed, who made this one. They both have full videos about their process, but I also took inspiration from lots of other great furniture artists who have done similar techniques. My first step was removing all of the hardware. Next, I poured chemical stripper onto the surface. My plan was to strip all of the finish entirely back so that I could whitewash the dresser. Once I had a thick layer of chemical stripper on the surface, I covered it with saran wrap so that it wouldn't dry out while it was activating. I'm recording this voiceover about a year after this whole process, and it's kind of crazy how I would do some things different even just 1 year later. Like, I probably would apply a lot more stripper than I did in this video so that I could get a lot more finish off. And I would probably go back and do a couple rounds of chemical stripper rather than just relying on one. It's just really interesting to watch and good to know that my process is changing slightly as my experience changes. After about 30 minutes, I removed my saran wrap and started scraping. I think it would have been a lot easier if I used a metal scraper and again if I used more chemical stripper to get a lot more finish off. When I was done with an area, I poured on mineral spirits and scrubbed it down with steel wool to deactivate the stripper. After lots of stripping, I finally started sanding using my 3x4 electric ray surf prep sander. Again, my goal was to get all the way down to bare wood, so this was a very long process, and I also had to keep in mind that I was working with veneer, so I had to be pretty gentle with my sanding. After lots of sanding, I was ready to whitewash the surface. To do this, I mixed white chalk paint with water in about a 50-50 ratio, then applied it to the surface using a Zibra paintbrush. I used water to wet the surface even more, and then wiped it all back with a towel. This technique allows for the wood grain to still be visible, but the surface to be bright white, just like the inspiration. One of the biggest problems with this dresser is that a couple of the drawers had broken dovetailing, which made it hard for the drawers to function and just not what you want from a dresser. So I mixed some 2-part epoxy together and then applied it into the grooves of the dovetailing. I clamped it all down and let it dry, and this was able to totally fix the drawers. Now we are on to the fun part, which is making the carved wood flowers or faux carved wood flowers. To do this, I used 3 different Redesign with Prima molds and paper clay. I dusted the inside of the molds with cornstarch so that they would be able to release easily, and then carefully pushed all of the paper clay into the mold, and it was able to make these flowers that were exactly what I was looking for. While they were still wet, I secured my flowers onto the surface using wood glue. This ended up being a great option because even now, a year later, none of my flowers have even partly come off, and none of my paper clay has cracked at all. I used masking tape to hold some of the flowers that were sliding in place while they dried. I also used a knife to cut any of the flowers that were hanging over onto another drawer so that all of the drawers could easily open and close. After working on this for a while, I really found that using bigger flowers looked the best on my project, and overlapping the flowers so that there were few gaps looked the best. But this is entirely creative freedom, so you can do whatever you think looks the best. When my flowers were totally dry, I really wanted them to look as much like carved wood as I could get them, as opposed to clay sitting on top. So I used Dixie Belle's Burlap chalk paint color and a Zibra round brush to dry brush this paint color onto the surface of the flowers so that it looked a little bit like wood underneath. Next, I mixed up more of my same whitewash watered down paint and applied the whitewash onto the flowers, again the same way that I had applied it onto the wood. At this point, I was ready to top coat using Varathane matte top coat in my Wagner Flexio 3000 spray gun. I decided to spray this because I was trying to avoid having any top coat pool in the details on the flowers and turn yellow, but I quickly encountered a problem. The surface began to turn red, which is what happens when wood tannins in the wood bleed up through your paint. Usually, you would see this right away after painting, but sometimes it waits until you're top coating. The only way to cover this up is by using shellac. Here you can see I used spray shellac over the entire surface, which helps block any future staining. But now, of course, my paint didn't match with my flowers, and it really looked bad because it was turning red instead of white. With that layer of shellac over the top, I re-whitewashed over top of the shellac, hoping that I could cover it up. After lots of tinkering, I did get this to work, but the wood grain wasn't as visible as before because there was a thicker layer over top, and my flowers just didn't quite match as well. They ended up matching fairly well, but just not quite as perfect as it was before. I repeated this process over the entire dresser so that no more bleed through would be visible while top coating. Now to address the hardware, I soaked it in distilled white vinegar and then used steel wool to scrub it all back to its original finish. This prepared it for any future paint so that it was nice and clean. Usually I try to keep the hardware in its original state, but this just didn't shine up to the best color, so I went ahead and sprayed it with some gold spray paint and then brushed black paint over top before wiping it back. This gave it the aged brass color that I was looking for. I used Howard's Feed and Wax and my Petite Dixie Belle wax brush to freshen up the insides of the drawers, the sides of the drawers, and applied it on the drawer rails, which helps everything slide smoother. Now that I'd applied shellac and re-whitewashed the entire surface, I began re-top coating with the same Varathane matte top coat and a Zibra Fan Brush. Again, I made sure to be very careful around all of the detailed flower carvings so that the top coat wouldn't pool in the details. I reattached the hardware and also took some sandpaper to clean up all of the edges around the dovetailing, just so that it was nice and professional for the future buyer. Alright, let's take one more look at where this dresser started. A little bit broken, not looking the best, $10. This was my inspiration and here it is now. This project was very time consuming. It was a lot of work, but it's one of my favorite pieces I've ever done. It's definitely one of my more unique pieces. So let me know if you have ever tried a style of furniture like this, or if you're interested in trying it in the future. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next video.